When a gorilla gives birth at the Berger Zoo, the zookeepers are overjoyed, but they suddenly scream in shock when they see something unexpected behind the mother. That morning, the staff at Berger Zoo were preparing for another regular day at work. They had just arrived and were starting to tend to the animals, walking over to their different units. A zookeeper named Sasha migrated towards the gorilla unit to tend to Njila, the pregnant gorilla who was due to give birth soon, but when she reached her enclosure, she noticed something unexpected. Njila was already in labor. As they all waited with barely concealed excitement for the baby to enter the world, they started preparing for the medical checkups they would have to run on both mother and child. However, they were pretty confident that Njila would need no help and that the birth would be perfectly smooth. After all, Njila had spent about 20 years in the wild and had given birth to 3 children in that time. The most senior zookeeper, Linda, often told and retold Njila's unusual story to new employees, emphasizing the unexplained scars that had covered the gorilla's body before they brought her there. The scars suggested that Njila had had a tough time in the wild, but, miraculously, she had maintained her soft heart in unusual warmth. Truly, the gorilla had been hard to communicate with at first, having loved her life in the wild despite everything. There was also the fact that Njila had only been able to come with 2 of her babies. The loss of the first baby was a tragic one that was described by a wildlife photographer who had witnessed the incident. The family of gorillas were lounging on trees, swinging from one to the other that evening. The baby gorillas were already way over a year old, and so their father, the silverback, was with them as well, and Gala had just grabbed one of the babies off a weak branch to prevent it from falling when a shadow started moving through the bush nearby. The gorillas, however, either didn't notice or didn't pay much attention. If they had, they might have recognized the spots and realized that it was one of their major natural enemies, the leopard. One of the babies had launched itself closer to the bush by flinging itself off a tree, and that was when the leopard pounced. Anyone who knows leopards know that they are good at lying in wait until their prey comes close to them, and they can ruthlessly tear into whichever unlucky animal that is. The leopard dug its claws and teeth into the tiny gorilla, picked it up, and ran. By the time the adult gorillas noticed, it was too late. They did try to run after the leopard to save their baby, but it was too fast for them to catch up, and so, the little gorilla was gone forever. Ngala mourned the loss of this baby for a long time, as did her other children. So, when Ngala arrived, she was withdrawn for a while, partly because of this incident and also because she felt strange in the new environment. As with humans, it takes a while for gorillas to adapt to new environments, especially ones that feel more restrictive than they were used to. The gorilla was, at first, unwilling to form new bonds, probably because she was still processing the loss of her baby, but Linda never failed to mention that as soon as Ngala warmed up to life at the zoo, it was a fantastic experience for them all, because she was the most soulful gorilla any of them had ever met. She was incredibly kind and motherly to not only her own children, but also the infant gorillas of her fellow mothers. Sasha, the newest zookeeper at the time, felt sympathy and pride for this gorilla that had overcome everything that had been thrown her way to still retain the beauty of her soul. She grew even more fond of Ngala after hearing this story and, thankfully, the gorilla seemed to feel the same way. So, it was to Sasha's great excitement when she found that the gorilla was pregnant again. That day, Njila's behavior was strange. Sasha had entered the gorilla enclosure to check on her usually cheerful friend, but Njila turned away from her, refusing to greet or even acknowledge her. Sasha was taken aback by this reaction, but simply wondered if Njila was undergoing some personal problems. The zookeepers usually tested the female gorilla's urine every morning. This was to follow their cycles, keep track of who was ovulating, and perform other important tests. Unsurprisingly, female gorillas have cycles just like humans do. This, however, wasn't Sasha's job and was usually done before she started her work for the day. So, Sasha went to Linda, who is in charge of these tests, and asked her if Ngala had exhibited any strange behavior that morning during her urine tests. That was when her colleague broke the news. Ngala was pregnant. Sasha, who had at first been bothered by Ngala's behavior, was now overjoyed by this new turn of events. Pregnancies are always good news in zoos because they mean that the animals are thriving in their habitats. And when they concern species at risk of extinction, the excitement doubles. Sasha and Linda jumped around with joy and the news spread like wildfire through the zoo as the zookeepers told their friends and followers on social media. It was the pregnancy of the gorilla century and everyone was interested. Little did they know that it would get even more interesting from there. Gorillas are very similar to humans and this is also apparent during their periods of gestation. Pregnant female gorillas sometimes exhibit atypical behavior and strange food preferences. This was the case with Njila. She was suddenly turning up her nose at soaked chow and now preferred the dry one, which was the opposite of her preference before pregnancy. The zookeepers also allowed her as much browse as possible, which was a feeding habit that allowed gorillas to seek their food themselves from the trees and the bush, in a bid to imitate their natural environment. This way, the gorillas could have a variety of food and feel more comfortable in their unit. Ngala also exhibited behavioral challenges, but the zookeepers were able to make allowances for that as well, understanding that she had to go through different phases during this complicated period. Sasha was more than patient with Ngila and tolerated what might have been regarded as the gorilla's excesses. This went on for about 8 months, since gorillas have a gestation period of about 8.5 months. A few months after the confirmation of Ngila's pregnancy, an ultrasound was carried out to determine the status of the coming baby. From the result of the test, the vets determined that Ngila was going to give birth to a big baby gorilla, and the excitement in the air became increasingly charged. This was why the zookeepers weren't worried when Ngila got bigger and bigger, even though many pregnant gorillas don't show obvious size increases due to their already huge body size. As weeks turned into months, Ngila became so big that she spent most of her days lying down. Still, none of the workers at the zoo were alarmed. Then came the D-Day. It was only a few days after Ngila's pregnancy had clocked 8 months. Sasha ran to the unit first thing in the morning as she usually did, and there she found that Ngila had gone into labor. As Ngila started pushing, things became chaotic. They soon realized that the baby wasn't coming out smoothly as they had expected. The bystanders became worried as hours passed and still no cry was heard. The vets began to consider going in to help, but eventually they decided to let nature take its course for as long as possible. Finally, they heard the cry of a newborn and the zookeepers screamed with excitement. This was until they saw how tiny the baby was. The vets wondered how this was possible considering the size of Ngila's belly and the amount of time she had taken to deliver the baby. They were about to step out of the enclosure when they heard a sharp groan from Ngila. The zookeepers found the gorilla flat on the floor in what looked like a birthing position. They stared at each other in awe as they watched the scene unfold slowly. And when they realized what was happening, the staff screamed in unison. Ngila pushed hard and another head popped out. Shock rippled through the confines of the unit as the bystanders crowded even closer. Finally, another baby dropped out of its mother and all became clear. The big belly, the extremely unusual behavior, and the long birthing process. It was all because Ngila was about to perform a miracle, the birth of twin gorillas. Twin births among gorillas are way rarer than they are in humans. In fact, it has been estimated that there is usually only one twin gorilla birth in a whole decade. In the past 50 years, only 3 twin births have been recorded among the 270 births that took place. To make matters worse, of the twins that were born in 1986, only one survived, and both of the twins that were born in 2008 didn't make it past the same day. So, to the zookeepers and Sasha in particular, it seemed fitting that a special gorilla like Ngala would be the one to have experienced this miracle, and with minimal problems as well. After this incredible feat, it wasn't surprising to the workers that Ngila was beyond weak and needed close attention and care. But that wasn't all. Because the twins had come a little earlier than the due date, they weren't fully developed, and had to be placed in incubators for a while. The air at the zoo and even the internet was filled with mixed feelings, as excitement mingled with fear at how things would turn out. Would the baby survive? How would Ngila react to being a new mother, especially to 2 children? It was as though the whole world was holding its breath as the babies fought desperately in their incubators. As medical professionals trooped in and out of the zoo, so did random people who wanted to see both baby and mother. The vets also attended to Angela, giving her undivided care and attention to ensure that she survived the critical stage that she had fallen into. The long labor and challenging delivery had taken a huge toll on her, and her body was struggling to recover. People all over the internet donated money to ensure that no expenses were spared in caring for the family of gorillas. The zookeepers had to delegate certain members to update the devoted internet followers about the status of the mother and her babies. Never had the world shown so much care for a single gorilla. It was nothing short of magic. As time went by, the excitement bubbled even harder, until finally, the zookeepers broke the news. Both the mother and her twins were out of the danger zone. Ngila would survive, and so would her children. The joy filled the atmosphere, but one question remained. What would their relationship look like? Would Ngila be able to care for both babies? The day Ngila was finally to have her babies with her, the zoo was so filled to the brim that they had to employ security men to keep people away from the animals. People watched as the zookeepers tentatively handed the babies to Ngila. It was as though everyone was holding a single breath. They were worried that she might reject them after all the time spent apart. But Ngila surprised them. Being a natural nurturer who had not only taken care of 3 children of her own, but had also helped other mother gorillas to keep their children safe, Ngila was able to manage this new responsibility well. She took both babies in each arm and looked at them with such tenderness and love that there was no doubt in anybody's mind about whether they were in safe hands. Sighs of relief rippled through the zoo as people hugged one another at this collective victory, not just for the zoo or for the gorilla world, but for humanity at large. In all this excitement, you may be wondering where the father of the twins went. Well, gorilla fathers are active in the family setting. They usually play with their kids and protect the whole group from predators. However, for about a year or 2 after the babies are born, they usually have nothing to do with them. So, Boy, the 23-year-old silverback who fathered the twins, would not associate with them for a while. Ngala and the loving zookeepers were, nevertheless, more than enough company for these babies. What lucky gorillas. Also, for days after this heartwarming event, people came from far and wide, swarming the zoo in their numbers to see this gorilla that had defied all odds and given birth to twin babies. The zookeepers welcomed this rare show of kindness from humans and their ability to be awestruck by little magical moments like this. Provisions were made to ensure order among the visitors. Still, people took countless pictures with the gorilla family and, eventually, Ngala became a popular hashtag for wholesome events. So, even as the years went by and the baby gorillas grew up, they remained special in the hearts of those who followed their story. Ngala became a hero and a symbol of resilience and miracles among animal lovers. A picture of her holding the twins while sitting on a tree branch became so popular that people suggested building a monument of it. A GoFundMe was opened, and although the statue was never built, the mere fact that it occurred to some people was enough to show how much of an impact Ngala's story had on the populace. What a beautiful tale. What did you learn from Ngala's story? Did you know that some animals can have twins just like people? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Bye.